Mr. Schwartz,
Here.
Mr. Shepard,
Here.
Mr. Von der Haar has already told us, has emailed us, notified us that he is unable to make this meeting. And I have to apologize. There is an error on the agenda. Ms. Longenecker is here joining us from the Treasurer of State's office.
Present.
And Ms. Hanrahan, present. I am the new chair for the commission. I will be chairing these from now on. I have a little bit of experience in Norwood. I believe when the city first came into fiscal emergency, I chaired the meetings. I'm not quite sure thereafter when Melissa took over the chairing duties, but I am back again. Melissa's got another position at OBM, and I am the designee of the director of OBM. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the prior meeting's minutes. We will table that for the moment. The former council president was the secretary, and she is no longer the secretary. She does have the minutes, but we don't have them with us at this time. We will approve them at our next meeting. Speaking of secretaries, so we'll defer that. Anybody who wants to volunteer, doesn't have to be a member of the commission, feel free. Next item on the agenda is a report of the financial supervisor.
Thanks, Sharon. In front of you, you have a packet of information, and it went out yesterday as well. They're described as attachment A, B, C, and D. We'll start with attachment A as we normally do. This is a statement of cash position at 12/31/2019 for the city of Norwood after the closeout of the books. The general fund did it end with a positive $4.6 million. We will actually discuss that more when we go over revenues and expenditures, why it is that high. There is one fund that is negative, Fund 33, Employee Flex Spending at $912. That is a timing thing, and this was a new fund in 2019 as part of benefits or incentive to some employees within the city. Also on page 2 of the statement of cash position, we've been talking about the water fund throughout 2019. I wanted to share that it did still end, it ended with a positive balance of $1.7 million. There is a study, as far as I know, being done on potential needs of capital for the water system, and until that is done, we will not know for sure which way the city will have to go and what financial impacts that will have at this time. Those are the main ones I wanted to point out. The street and state highway, which were on page 1, also ended in a positive balance, and they are part of the financial recovery plan as well. Any questions on A? Okay. Then we'll go to B. This is recovery plan revenues versus actual revenue. So we get to see what was estimated for the year for the 3 funds, general, street, and state highway, and where they actually ended up at the end of 2019. The general fund was almost $2 million more than expected. There was over $694,000 in miscellaneous or other that was not something that was planned upon. I do have a breakout of that if you are interested in why. They sold land. There were parcels within the city that were delinquent on property taxes. They got those up to date and then were able to sell those parcels, and that was around $256,000. That also got them property tax refunds for the portion that's the city income or city property taxes. There was health insurance reimbursements of $44,000, insurance recoveries. Benovation was the retirees' health care that changed, and Donna Lakes talked about that a lot at our commission meetings, where they went away from the business of Benovation and then put a plan in place here, and Benovations actually sent them a check that was due to past employees here, and those were paid out, but you had to show those as revenues. BWC refund, they have gotten refunds the last couple of years. That's not something we typically estimate in a forecast because it is not a for sure revenue source. But this year it was $247,000. There was some payroll restitution. Overall, like I said, there was $694,000 of unplanned monies in the miscellaneous other revenue part. Municipal income tax was also larger than expected by over $1 million. And talking with the treasurer's office, that was mainly due from collections of individuals and withholdings this year. So that will also be looked upon when the city has to update their recovery plan. Some other big ones, intergovernmental revenue. The biggest reason that was more than expected, there was more local government monies that came down from the state to the county to the city. Charges for services, 78% of the collections in there is from EMS billing. The runs were actually up around 6%, and the revenues were up from those increased runs by 4.8%. I did talk to the fire department to find out where our runs stood for the year to see if that was contributing to it, and it definitely did.
Okay.
They do soft billing. It is not hard billing, so you're not always going to see a 6% increase in runs and a 6% increase in revenues. That does not go hand in hand, but you should see some sort of increase. Fines and forfeitures, the biggest item in here is traffic fines. It makes up 91.4% of this. We've talked about this all through the year, and I asked for how many citations were actually written and what ones they would be collecting on from the police department. Those really were not really that much higher, but the collections have been higher with what they had put in play for last year. So we've seen an increase in that for the last 2 years. Investment income, this was our first full year to see how much investment income could come in, and that is based upon the treasurer's office putting some monies in Star Ohio. That's based upon not only the percentage that you can get in interest income, but also the balances that you can put in there at a time. And it is a balancing act because they're moving monies over there, and it ties it up for at least 3 days before they can move it over to their general operating where they pay out their normal expenditures. I missed one, hotel tax. This was also the first full year we saw the other hotel come online and the earnings that the city would get from hotel tax from that. So this would be our first look at it being in play for a full year, and it was higher than we had expected as well. That's the general fund. The two other funds on here, their biggest monies are MVL and gas tax. And again, the gas tax increased from the state, and so we saw a higher amount come in than was projected when the recovery plan was done. Any questions over the revenues?
Yeah, the health insurance reimbursement, which is a component of the other revenue, at $44,000. What period does that cover, and what is that exactly?
That would have been for the prior year, and it was from, I believe it was from the other insurance that they had, but I'd have to go back and look to definitely answer you on that.
Okay, that does that have anything to do with employees paying a portion of the health care?
No.
Okay.
Good question.
Do the employees pay a portion of health care?
They were supposed to be paying originally, and that was the thought process going into negotiations. To my knowledge, that never did occur during the year, that they were paying a portion to anybody.
Okay, so that means non-contract workers as well,
Correct.
not non-bargaining.
Non-bargaining.
So that was driven by the police and fire contracts? Is that what we're saying?
Meaning,
The lack of paying a portion of the premiums as part of the negotiation of those contracts?
that played a part in it. I can't speak to that because it was a legal thing, and the city dealt with that on its side. So, and the person that really dealt with that during the year is not here anymore. So I don't want to misspeak and say something that's wrong. But there was a legal thing involved.
So, in the case of, I can only mimic it, give you an example of the state. The collective bargaining contracts for state employees, pretty much, the results of that pretty much drive what the rest of us that aren't in a union get as far as benefits are concerned. So it could be one of those things too where yes, we were in negotiations. Whatever resulted from that, I don't know. And it's really not, we're only looking at finances here. But from a parity viewpoint, that's how the state looks at it. So the unions negotiate, we get the benefit of union negotiations in the state, quite frankly.
Did the council ever vote on the employees were to pay a portion? I mean, was that part of it?
I would have to go back and look to make sure, so I don't want to misspeak again.
And I do have a question. Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I'd be curious what the new officers ultimately in their reports, maybe they can speak to that point. That's something that this committee has looked at. Obviously, health insurance premiums is a large portion of the budget for any company. And we seem to be, in the data we've seen, there was a report that came out a year or so ago about how many communities like us, cities like us, get 100% of their health care paid. So that was something that we were looking at. And I know certain people in this council were interested in seeing that potentially move forward where employees would pay a portion, similar to the rest of the private sector and the rest of these other villages and cities. So I guess I wouldn't want that to fall by the wayside, since I think we've made some progress in that area.
Good. Okay. Fair enough. I'm sorry. I didn't catch what you said about Benovation.
Oh.
Is that employee benefits, or for
That
some reason
was-
I thought it's retirees?
It was retirees. They had retirees' health care benefits.
Okay, so it
and
was
and a C9 trust as well.
Okay.
With the, they got a portion of money there. So both of those they did away with last
Okay.
year. The city council and the mayor as well. And they worked with another committee to pull together a new retiree benefit, and it is a payment out yearly of a set
Okay.
amount. And then they went through a application process that the committee came up with that was on there, and they had retirees on there as well to determine who would be eligible for that.
Okay.
And so it's shown in its own department here
Okay.
too. So,
Okay.
but the Benovation went away last year, and the last payments I think were supposed to be pulled in and sent by the end of this year. So
But the 29,000 from Benovation kind of folded.
yeah.
And so this was a list of outstanding
refund.
checks, like
Okay.
they still owed to people.
Okay.
And so they sent that information to the city. We
So you
directed,
could
they had to
look at
receive it in, and then Donna Lakes, who was, spearheaded the retiree thing, she contacted everyone that she could to get, the check
Paid.
rewritten.
Okay.
So there's expenses on the city side to account for most of this 29,000 that they
Yes.
did pay it back out.
Okay. I do have another question.
Yeah.
Where was it at? I heard you say that the city has soft billing for EMS, which isn't, it's not unusual. There is the weighing of how much, is it worth getting extra people or charging a firm to go after these folks, or is it better just this is something we do as a city and we absorb it? So I understand that. The fines and forfeitures are going up. I think you said for the past 2 years, over the past 2 years. Is it just better collections, or?
From the information I got, and it was really from the mayor's court, they put payment plans in play. They've kind
Okay.
of stepped up some things and pushed a little harder to get some payments in. So that's really what's driving that up. The citations were up 2 years ago, but there wasn't a huge increase this past year when I was looking at the data
Okay.
that was sent to me. So it's more the collections right now and getting those in.
Okay. Do you know, do they eventually send some of these people to collection?
That I can't answer. I don't
Okay.
know if the current members can answer that one or not, but we can find out.
It'd be interesting, just. Okay, that's all the questions I had. I don't know. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, thanks.
Okay. Any others on the revenues? Okay. The next one is C, and this is expenditures for the general fund, and then the last page will be our street and state highway. Overall, I want to say, they were below expenditures for the general fund. If you look at page 6 of 7, they did not hit all the expenditures that they had planned on doing. A lot of that had to do, not all the capital that was in the capital plan that was then put into the recovery plan was done by the city last year. There's a lot of those not done in the general fund. Staffing levels were not at the FRP, the financial recovery plan, estimates in several departments. The biggest one being police. They never hit the staffing levels that were projected within the forecasted plan. So those had some significant impacts on the outcome of the balances at the end of the year.
Okay.
A couple I do want to point out, because most of these were not exceeds. On page 3 of 7, we did have the police administration, and before I go into that, we did look. I and April worked with the city before the end of December. We did do some appropriation changes, but it did not affect appropriations overall. They had to stay within the overall recovery plan expenditures. We did move some things between line items that we knew were not needed. Because there are no more expenditures going to happen there, or whatever the case may be, to make sure that their appropriations were in compliance with their expenditures. So I forgot to say that. But this is really just what the recovery plan said versus what the expenditures were, and not the appropriations. So I want to make that clear.
Okay.
Page 3 of 7, though, we did have the police admin over, and one of the reasons there is because we had a change in healthcare and how somebody, they changed the plan, and the open enrollment last year was through March, and so that change occurred after the FRP was done, and it is something that they were able to do. It just was not a plan accordingly in the FRP. So that was one change for it. Page 4 of 7, the fire department did exceed.
Sorry, Anna Mary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Healthcare open enrollment was extended, therefore,
Yeah, so last year, remember, we changed, they changed insurance providers.
Right.
And so there was a timing issue, and the open enrollment was supposed to, I think, be through January, and then it was pushed back more, and it was still open because there was a lot of communication and other things, and the city could speak to that, those who were a part of that. So it was extended through March. So when the FRP was done, we had, Jim Stith and I had the information of what was to be expended based upon what we were shown, like in February, of who was taking what plans. And some of that did change after the March date.
so are we explaining the 2.19% overage? Really, it's only $6,000. Is there some reason to assign that to this extended open enrollment period?
Yeah, well, because when you do the recovery plan, we looked at what was in play at that time, or what the intentions were with staffing levels, like that the police department is a great example, because they were not at the top staffing levels when that was done. But the intention of the mayor and council was to get it at 45, we'll say. I'm not sure right now. But they never got to that level during the year, but we had put that in play. The same thing is with this department here. We knew who the staffing was, and then we were told what their insurance, whether it was single, family,
So
things like that.
you're saying that our plan was off in part because open enrollment extended so long? Okay, so this doesn't explain the spending
Just explains
so much as the
why it's
estimate,
different, yeah.
the budget. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes. Now, since we're on open enrollment has closed for this year, so it has not been extended. So that period is done.
Okay.
So we won't have the same issues going forward, other than if we bring in new personnel, and then that would change things.
Okay.
Okay, page 4 of 7. The fire department, based on the estimates that we started with, the recovery plan that was adopted in March, and then where they ended up actually, two things occurred, and it is in personal services. The amount for people leaving and what was expected to be paid out in their thank you, severance, was higher than we expected by $106,000. Overtime exceeded what we thought would occur, and a lot of that had to do with they dipped down into their personal service staffing as well, which cost them overtime for that department. And that's why it was over overall. I mean, they had some not as high expenditures in contractual materials and supplies, but personal services is really the highest expenditure within that department. There was one other slight exceeds, and that was on page 5 of 7, and that was in the healthcare medical services. They really have 3 departments here. It's the health administration, medical, and environmental. So if you look at those, really in total, it was not over, but I'm just pointing it out, and it was very slight, for $563. But again, on page 6 to 7, they were below what the estimated expenditures were forecasted to be in the recovery plan for the year.
And if I heard you correctly, to a great extent, this could be attributed to the vacancies.
A lot of it's vacancies, then some of it is also the capital plan, because there were some large expenditures that were supposed to occur during the year that did not.
Okay, so I would imagine we may be seeing those this year.
Depending on the updated recovery plan and capital plan, yes.
Okay. Okay.
The last page, 7 and 7, is the street and state highway. These did not see the expenditures that were projected. I know we talked about at the last commission meeting, they had done some bid processes and they're in the works on doing some street projects going into this year. So that's something as well that has to be addressed within the capital plan and the next FRP too.
Okay.
So those should have, or were going to potentially happen in 2019, and they were deferred.
They were not done, so we'll have to make sure that the city looks at that going into 2020.
To give a perspective from the state viewpoint, our capital appropriations is for 2 years, and it's not unusual that you don't even see the bidding until the second year of that biennium. Depends on how grand of a scale that particular capital expenditure is going to be. Also, the state overall has an issue with finding the workers. If we've got a couple of really big projects going, that's where the construction workers are. We have a labor force issue in that respect. So.
The last item, unless there's more questions on the expenditures?
No.
Okay. The last item is the bank reconciliation, D. This gives you a look at what all the bank accounts that they have that has all the funds that are on A. And then the adjustments to the bank balance, like if you reconciled your book. The biggest item being the reconciling items that are still being researched by the treasurer's office is dwindling down. And I have actually sat down with them and we went through some things just with new eyes. And actually we brought up the city auditor's office because it's really a collaboration from both. Because they do all the input and stuff, but the treasurer's office does the banking part of things. And so sometimes you have to bring both heads together so you can talk about and see where the issues are. So our last meeting on that went really well, and I plan on working with the treasurer's office again on some of these. So, but that's where we are on the bank reconciliation.
Good job getting that whittled down.
That can be attributed to the treasurer's office. So.
Great. Good job to them. I did have a question going back on the previous attachment,
Sure.
attachment C, I guess. Page 3 at the bottom, the fire administration department.
Yes.
That seems to be below actual. I didn't know if there's anything driving that.
Yeah, the fire chief left. He retired August. And so that vacancy was not filled for the year. So that payroll was projected for the rest of the year in this line item. We did have an interim, but they were under the fire department because that's where they were originally. And they hadn't been moved to the, officially to the fire chief to get that pay and stuff, so we left them there.
Is there a new chief in place?
I cannot answer that.
No.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Anna Mary. Great stuff. Glad to see the balances. Looks good. Very good. Okay. Next item on the agenda is old business, new business. But if the mayor and council president chooses, we could take your report before addressing old or new business. It's totally up to you.
I'd love to hear old and new business
Okay.
first and see what
Okay.
what you guys are. Sure.
Okay, okay. It has been brought to my attention that there has been a request for public participation. I looked, and I'm sorry I did not bring them with me. I looked at the most recent set of bylaws that I could find, and those bylaws for the commission did have a section for public participation. But because we have new commission members and so on, and because we really probably need to go back and review our bylaws and see if we want to amend those, I'm going to leave it, the agenda as is, but I would offer that up to the commission members to think about. I actually will I'll give you an amended bylaws. I've been working on them for review prior to our next meeting, and it does have public participation. You can choose to limit that. We can put it in the bylaws, anything that you want. I know in previous meetings that I have chaired, not here but elsewhere, where we have had public participation, we have basically limited it to 15 minutes. So I've given people the option of 5 people, 3 minutes each, or 3 people, 5 minutes each. But I will say that the forum for public participation is just for items that have been addressed by the commission at the commission meeting. It's not anything that has happened in city council or any other place going on. We would be addressing, any public participation we would be addressing has to do with commission matters.
What we've done the last few years is
Yes.
give people 3 minutes, and I think
Okay.
the 15-minute period sounds familiar. And if they requested to speak prior to the meeting, then they would be allowed to speak at the meeting.
Okay.
If they requested to speak right before or during the meeting, then they would have to wait till the next meeting.
Okay,
So that's kind of the precedent that's been set,
okay, okay.
if I remember correctly.
Okay. Let me do a little bit of crafting with the bylaws and see if we might incorporate that, so that way everybody's on the same understanding and we can go forward from that. But thank you. Old business. I can't say because this is my welcome back to Norwood. I looked to Mr. Shepherd, Mr. Schwartz. Anything that we had been working on previous, I don't have the luxury of having the last minutes. So I really can't speak to anything. Balances are really good. I did note that the last financial recovery plan, the FRP, was approved back in March, I believe, of 19. So we're pretty much due for an update. And so maybe I would put that under new business, that I think at this time, given the new administration, that it would be to everyone's benefit, particularly the new administrations, the cities and the commissions, that we look at, in working in cooperation with the auditor's office, look towards updating that recovery plan.
Okay.
Okay. That way, the new administration, using the pluses, the progress that has been accomplished prior to you coming in, can build upon that. This is your city, so it gives you the opportunity to put your stamp on it.
Understood.
Okay. All right, great.
As far as old business, I know one of the
Yes.
things that we've looked at in the last year or so is the internal control report assessment that was done. And I know obviously one of the questions I had was the monitoring of those changes and that were implemented and continuing to make sure that those are happening. And I don't know if these guys can speak to any updates or any progress that follow up or how that process works.
I'll address that actually. So it's the report on accounting methods. Both Ken and Vic both have a copy of those because we gave those to them in December. We actually monitor that from our office as well as council should be as well. They have made some moves on that, and I actually have. I didn't bring it with me though, but we can do that for the next meeting to show
Okay,
where they are
great.
at on each of one of those and talk about which ones have been cleared fully or partially cleared or have not been done or in the works or whatever we want to say. My office, we come in every so often and then we look and see where some of those things are. I know, so there's been a couple of things that have been addressed and done through council, and like one of the things is financial reports, and that's being done now at those meetings. So we are looking at that. There are still several things that need to be done, especially in the policies and procedures area. So.
No, that'd be great. I think that would help the newer members of the committee as well understand where some of the, lack of a better word, weaknesses were in the control area and what we're doing to address those. And so obviously it has an impact on everything we're doing here. So
Thank you for mentioning that, actually. One of the things that I did look at was that report on accounting methods, and that's good to hear that progress is being made. I'm not going to mention any particular item that was in the report, but very eye-opening overall to me. I was somewhat aghast at some of the things that were done from an internal control perspective. So I'm glad to hear that. And also, we don't get out of your hair, Mayor, until all those comments on the report on accounting methods have been addressed. So, and quite honestly, that in some cities and townships and villages has been the thing that has kept a local government in fiscal emergency the longest. It isn't the condition that got them into fiscal emergency. It's addressing that report on accounting methods. And quite frankly, just from the viewpoint of policies, it's not easy to write a policy. It's very time consuming. In some cases, there may be examples out there that maybe the auditor can provide, or you can look on the internet or speak with your fellow mayors and presidents of council elsewhere. So there are examples out there. Very good.
May we review the requirement for a new plan?
Yes.
Yes?
She says, with some hesitation. I'm trying really hard not to open up the laptop, although I do have it.
Well, maybe we can just review a little bit from memory.
Okay, I got it. So when the city first came into fiscal emergency, they were given 120 days from the first meeting of the commission to come up with a plan. The plan has to have in it, the plan, by the way, has to be approved by the legislative authority, by council, and then is submitted by the mayor on behalf of council to the commission. It has to include actions and I'm going to paraphrase because it's got for the municipal corporation, township, or county, actions that the city will take to eliminate all fiscal emergency conditions determined to exist pursuant to section 118.04. So basically, I looked at the declaration of fiscal emergency, and the city went into fiscal emergency due to deficit funds.
And this
That-
was in 2016?
Yes.
Okay.
Though, with the exception of those few funds that are in very small deficits, that has pretty much been addressed. But I will tell you that there is I shouldn't say convoluted because my colleagues at the auditor's office have to follow it. But if you read it in code, it's pretty complicated. But there is a formula upon which they determine if funds are in deficit. So it's not clear as we've looked at the fund balance. They look pretty good. But even at the time that the fiscal emergency analysis was done, they do it at the end of the most current fiscal year
Yes.
and then like
4 months out.
4 months out. So the most recent one for Norwood would have been June 30th, 2016. At that time, the general fund did have a deficit, but the formula that's in code to determine actual deficit for purposes of going into fiscal emergency, the general fund deficit did not bring the city into fiscal emergency. It was actually the street construction and repair fund, the state highway fund. There's quite a number actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it the BJA crime prevention, the 21st century grant, EMS, police academy donation, and the bond retirement fund. Oh, and a small in building assessment. So when we come to a point where what happens, skipping ahead to the goal here, is requesting release from fiscal emergency. When the commission votes on that, the auditor's office then goes back and does the same analysis to determine whether or not they have addressed the condition that brought them into fiscal emergency, which is deficit funds. I know it's disingenuous to a certain degree, and it's hard to follow because we just looked at the cash balances,
I'm not arguing
but
for
the
us.
formula is, and we're not there yet.
Yeah. What I recall from, the fourth quarter of last year was, well, a broader review. The numbers under this 2019 recovery plan
Okay.
that we're looking at today, those were established in that original plan. Am I right?
No, so it's been updated every year.
Every year it gets updated,
Yes.
and then there was an event at our November meeting where former Mayor Williams declared that some assumptions he had made that allowed the plan to be crafted as it was, specifically about the number of people, number of firemen and policemen, was no longer reasonable. He said, my assumptions, paraphrasing of course, my assumptions about the number of people required in fire and police was, I've come to determine that's not feasible, and largely because the number of people is determined by the contract, and his hope that contract would be overlooked or, not applicable. He determined that wasn't a reasonable position.
Right.
So, at the time, I believe that triggered the requirement for a new plan, but because his administration was almost over and the new administration was around the corner, that was put off. So is there an obligation for this administration and council to come up with a plan from scratch? Or I'm just,
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
maybe mayor and council are fully aware of what their obligations are. If I were them, I would not be fully aware. And so I'm just wondering, for my benefit, for their benefit, what is really required?
They could actually do one from scratch. But I would certainly, on an update, I would certainly include the things that have already been done. And that's what we do. We have a history of what's been done to date. Now, and I'm not going to pick any one, but certainly the new administration could undo what has been done before. But to the extent that those things that have been done already have improved the financial condition, they're going to have to find improvements elsewhere.
So their obligation is to come up with a 1-year plan or a multi-year plan?
5 years.
5-year
5
plan,
years.
okay, that's why I was wondering whether these,
Based
So-
on progress that it will be done for the plan period, if you will, of a year.
so a 5-year plan that brings us out of fiscal emergency with the assumptions that are deemed appropriate, and I believe is it the mayor's responsibility to come up with that, or is it the council's? Mayor presents it to the council approves or sends it back, then it comes to us, and we approve or send back.
True.
Okay.
That's
And what is the time, sorry,
Go ahead.
That is correct, but the auditor of state has to review that plan before
Right.
we will allow the mayor to bring it to the commission.
sounds
Or
reasonable.
council.
Yeah, good. And so then we have some clearly understood period of time, or some, let's just keep working at it and we'll know it's taking too long when we see it. What's that?
There is nothing in statute that addresses that. I would just say that,
I think timing-wise, it has to be updated annually, so.
yes,
So we do have a time frame. The last one was updated
March
March 27th of
27th, I think
15.
was brought,
So
yes.
annually, it has to be by that date unless Mr. Schneider would come to the commission and ask for an extension, at which point that would be up to Mrs. Hanley.
So if everything goes swimmingly, the next time this commission meets, we will be reviewing a plan that has been approved by the auditors and approved by the council?
That would be the intent, yes.
yes.
Okay.
Um,
And it will have, the assumptions will be deemed reasonable, and it will get us out of fiscal emergency.
It will show a positive balance at the end of 5 years.
So the general fund is already positive. So what the auditor of state and this commission is looking for is that those balances, stay positive in the general
Okay.
fund, and that there are no negatives in other funds. So I'm just going to go out and say this. That this city is looking at another year in emergency because you've already ended the year with a deficit balance in another fund. So we test those based on 12/31.
Okay.
So, we've got to clean the deficit up in that deficit fund. Even though it was a small amount, it's still a deficit fund.
So if somehow or other we had shoveled $1,000 into the employee flex spend fund,
Correct.
we would no longer be in fiscal emergency?
No.
No,
You would still be in emergency.
Why would we be?
because you haven't addressed, not you, not
No,
you
I get it.
personally.
No, I'm
The city
okay.
has not addressed all the comments on the report on accounting methods.
There's 3 things you have to do. We will actually test every condition to make sure you do not meet any conditions under fiscal emergency. And there's
Including a
6.
negative balance
Yes.
anywhere,
Anywhere.
including,
Failure to make payroll,
Payroll,
not paying debts.
payables, treasury balance, and then there's the
Accounting
minimum-
practices.
The minimal levy thing. That's all conditions. The other
Sorry, what's
part,
the minimal levy thing?
the inside millage.
That's just we have to certify that get a certification from the county auditor, making sure that they haven't reduced another municipality's inside millage to increase Norwood's for operating
I've
capacity.
never seen that happen,
Okay.
It has.
but,
Okay,
oh my.
that's fine.
So you have that. That's one. The next step is we need to make sure that the report on accounting method comments are clear in full.
Okay.
Which we will update where that is at the next commission meeting. The third thing that is required, which is really where the recovery plan comes in, is a 5-year forecast for those funds that were in deficit or had been in deficit while we were, I think, in this. So that's why the FRP really is what's used for that. And in that process, you have to make sure the city is covering all expenditures that they know and the intent of where they're going. And that does need to include capital expenditures, because we can't allow a municipality or anybody to come out and then all these known factors that were not planned for in a forecast come back, and then they're back into a deficit. We don't want them to come back to a deficit shortly after we release them. So you have to make sure all the expenditures that they will be seeing or issues across the city have to be in there.
Okay,
Is that fair?
okay.
I like when you use, divorce, not separation.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what we're looking for, yeah.
So just so I understand,
Yeah.
if things would go, as he said, swimmingly, we have no negative balances, we clear all the accounting procedural weaknesses and test those items, we have a viable 5-year forecast that includes all expected CapEx, everything's positive, and that gets assessed every 12/31. So assume just going for the next 12 months, and there's no reason, I think anybody here sees a reason to necessarily rush this through just for the sake of getting out of it. But we do all those things, and at 12/31, we check all those boxes. Then another 4 months or so goes by, and the bodies, I heard that somewhere, the bodies that need to approve, then, so theoretically, the earliest anything would happen would be a year and a half from now, roughly. Is that what I heard through all that?
Well, I'm not going to say a year and a half. I mean, if everything works like you're saying, I
Yeah.
think at a meeting this time next year, the city could be in a position to request release. And then we'll have to do our analysis, which, it will just be based on the 12/31 information, because when you test the 4 months out, it's only if you met something at 12/31 of those 6 conditions. We're not going to let the city request release without knowing that they don't meet any of those conditions. So we will only have to test at 12/31. So the actual termination could happen between February and April of next year if everything works out.
Okay.
Let me write that down.
It is not a
April.
for sure thing, though.
No,
because-
no, and
we still have a
again,
lot
I
of
am in no
things
hurry
in play, yeah.
to,
We do not have union contracts solidified either, and that's a huge expenditure for the city.
Yeah, that definitely, payroll costs are the highest. I mean, the cities provide services, and who provides the services? People. So there has to be certain reasonable assumptions made, and right now I don't think we have a basis upon which we can make any assumptions.
and what's always been an issue, and I've said it publicly in this meeting before, is we have police and fire contracts that require certain things. We have a budget that requires something less. So until we marry those two, I think we're always going to be in this kind of void where we have two sets of rules we're living by. One may be more powerful because it's driven by the state, but then you have the legal issues which go with police and fire and us not honoring the contract as it's written. So when you want to talk about old business and new business, that's something that certainly is the 800-pound gorilla that's sitting out there that I told the previous mayor that we're just kicking the can down the road until we figure out how to do that, or if we can't do that, what are the repercussions of that?
correct me if I'm wrong, again, not coming in newer, not completely new, but didn't the mayor have that assumption before the contract was fully negotiated?
They've been in
'Cause he-
negotiation a couple of times, and then, and you look at the intent and the timing, so the intent was what was put into the assumptions of the recovery plan. I'd have to look at the. timing.
Okay.
So again, coming into 2020, they're in negotiations right now. Still.
Okay.
So they are following, there's a clause in there to follow that contract, so I would say we're not at the complement the contract states right now, and that was part of the discussions in the fourth quarter that Mr. Shepherd was alluding to. And then we were asked, my office was asked to look and see, not to redo the recovery plan, but what effects would happen if we went to full complement by this coming year. And we produced that and showed, and we worked with Jim Stiff, the city auditor, and it did, if it stayed the way it was, it did have them in negatives again in the general fund.
That's exactly my point,
Okay.
is we have this and we have this, and they both should agree, need to agree if possible. If they don't agree, then what is the ultimate outcome of that? You continue to not honor a police and fire contract because the state budget requires you to be in this position and there's not enough money? You know, that's the great dilemma that
Right.
I don't know if anybody has the answer to, but
And I would say to you that going forward, any plan that the commission receives has to honor all contracts. Because we can't, as a commission, tell somebody, it's the same as saying, you know, that paper supplier, they charge too much, let's not pay them. That's the same thing. It would be, the vendors in this case are the police and fire. So I can't, and that's not reasonable. And it's not a bona fide plan, in my opinion. So, yeah, we do need a new plan, and we do need it as soon as you can. And again, my understanding is this came up in November, but the current mayor, the former mayor, was on his way out, so the commission kind of let it stand. But it has to be bona fide. Now, I understand, and it has to be reasonable. I am not the legal counsel for the city, and I will never pretend to be. They have someone that's in that position. I'm not a bargaining negotiator. I have no dog in the race in this matter. At the end of the day, I want what everybody else wants, for us to get out of here. So I will agree with you that without seeing the contract, I'm just going to say that in my experience, any place that has police and fire, that is a majority, safety forces is a majority of the cost of a city, guaranteed. But you still have to live with the contract. Now, part of that is negotiation skills. It's give and take on both sides, okay? But it isn't in conflict because if the contract is what it is, whatever the end result is, and your fiscal condition is what it is. So if you're paying X plus 2 for police as opposed to X, police and fire, I don't want to, and now you're paying X plus 2, you got to subtract 2 somewhere else in the city expenses. Whether it's recreation, whether it's streets, something that is supported by the general fund. And it's not easy. It's not easy because safety services is such a large part. Now, this is a city. I know in small villages, they've disbanded the police department. You can't do that in a city and still expect people to live in it. It's tough. It's hard to be a mayor.
May we review another item,
Yes.
certainly for my benefit
Sure.
and perhaps for the new members? Could you review sunshine laws, please?
I would like to have the Attorney General's office do that, but I can give you the Cliff Notes version of it. From what I follow as a state employee, who also files ethics disclosures too. No business of the commission is to occur behind closed doors. Everything is open. The meetings must be publicized, so it gives an opportunity for folks to come and observe it. I understand that this is streamed, I believe, so there is a capacity there, which is an extra bonus. Not every place does have it. But we have to meet as a commission. We can't, like I can't stay in Columbus and hold the meeting by phone. It has to be in person. Anything that is distributed at a commission meeting is public records. So, if somebody wanted to get a copy of this plan, all they'd have to do is ask for it. Any of Anna Mary's financial information, and we do provide some, but sometimes we don't. To try and save trees, we in some cases may not have enough. They can file a public records request. Now, my dilemma, I guess, at this point is that normally that would go to the secretary of the commission, but we have none at this point. So I would say that any public records requests would come to me, and I will fulfill them.
Okay, let me ask a specific question.
Sure.
Can Ken and I, are there any constraints on Ken and me getting together?
No, as long as it doesn't constitute a quorum, and a quorum of the commission is 4.
So Vic, Ken and I could meet and there's no restriction on that?
Right. But if you 3 meet and then email Brad, guess
Then we
what?
tip the
Yes.
trigger.
And so they have a clause in there, it's called the round robin discussions, where that takes it into consideration. If there is enough of a breadcrumb of a trail where, okay, it's just an email between people, and then that email gets forwarded and then it keeps getting forwarded, you have to watch those
Yeah, I think we
things.
had a kerfluffle in the city of Cincinnati over some texts. Okay,
Yeah, and
got it.
the beauty of the electronic age is we can communicate more freely. The bad part about it is we can communicate more freely, so we have to watch it.
Okay.
If all 3 commission members attended a city council meeting, that's 4 of you there at least, and I believe the mayor is there, so that's 5 actually, right?
Sometimes that's a little
That
Sunday party, huh?
actually could be considered a meeting of the commission.
So then what would
Because
have
you've
to
got a
happen?
quorum. You cannot hold yourself out as representing the commission should you speak at city council. You can only speak in terms of the fact that you are a citizen of the city.
Okay, so if Brad and I attended a meeting and Ken and Vic were there, that would be a quorum. The meeting would go on, Brad and I just sit there quiet. Is there some obligation?
As long as there's no discussion of the matter of the commission,
Okay.
it's fine. Yeah, that is the toughest.
What if
Because it's
that's
so
a-
common, and it's so innocent that it's not, no one means to do that. It's just that if you were invigorated enough to spend at least an hour of your time instead of at work to do this, you're probably really involved in the city. So you're probably going to run into these folks a lot more often than other people. So it's a tough thing to always be cognizant of that in the back of your mind.
Thanks.
What if you're
Thank you.
representing yourself as a citizen, and again, the scenario of the four of us would get together to talk, I would be there as a citizen, and I happen to be on the commission.
As long as you're not talking about matters of, involving the commission.
Like the budget, like things
That's
like
tough.
that. Yeah. Okay. Because that's a very, because if you say, well, I'm talking to these guys about the streets. Well, the streets are in the budget. But as a
Oh,
citizen, I
that-
don't
yeah,
want potholes on my
that's-
street. I mean,
Right.
it's very gray.
If I'm not mistaken, two of you live on the same street now. Floral?
I won't disclose that.
Okay. So you could, say you did, I don't know. I don't even know where Floral is, but say you did.
You don't know where Floral is?
No. I
It's
just
close.
I was just telling my colleague that one thing that I always neglect to do when I go to commission meetings is actually go out into the area in which I go to. I just basically get in the estate car, drive, do the meeting, come back. I was in Portsmouth, Ohio, and they have a beautiful painted retaining wall mural. I've been there I don't know how many years, never went to see it. Saw it on PBS one night. So yeah, that's on my to-do list, is to go out and explore. But yeah, it's a very tough thing. I would say in that case, yeah, it's so far removed. Feel free to call up and call your council person and complain about your streets. I didn't get any response.
Yeah, and that's the former commissioner, Ms. Snyder. I asked her that same question and said, well, at what point where do I break the line between being a citizen and a member of this committee? They're not mutually exclusive, but there has to be some separation there that,
Yeah.
help give me some guidelines as to
Yeah.
how I can live
In that case,
going
it's so
forward.
far removed. But if you were, the four of you were going to get together and ask Ken, hey, Ken, do you think council is going to pass that plan? Can't do that.
Got it.
I have a point of clarity.
Yes.
Since it was brought up. So with the recovery plan that has to be done, we've done two different methods.
Okay.
So the first couple had contract in play and levels, and then there was recovery plan items that was the intent of council to negotiate basically to get the levels further down or to get healthcare costs paid, which we've discussed before and was
Okay.
brought up earlier. In the last couple, or at least this one, those were really moved up into the top and not as a recovery plan item. So
Oh, okay.
as they move forward, and we do, as of right now, we do not have any union contract signed, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if those will be done before this would be approved, but if it's not, is the commission saying that they would want the version to be where you show union contracts that are in play right now, only because there's an evergreen clause that's pulling it forward, because there's still negotiation with the intent as a recovery plan item? Is that what you would like to see? And then with that, what would be reasonable, or is that something to discuss on what the intent of council would be in that? Is that a fair question?
Yes. And don't ask me why, but I fully understood that.
Good.
So, I don't know if y'all have your plan, but they'll show, what is it? Well, why don't you just look at it? The first part will be certain actions that will be done, some of which will continue, because some of the stuff is still ongoing as of the past plan. Or the current plan, I should say, I'm sorry. Some of them will show completed. Like now, the street construction repair fund is not a deficit fund. That's in there as completed. So those are the actions. So the next part is the actual Are you gonna do this much? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, it's always 3 years of actual and then 5 years
Okay.
of forecasted.
All right, so you're gonna have 8 years worth of where something falls, and you'll have like what you estimate your revenues are gonna be, your expenditures, and they will work as far as what the current, if people have step increases, if there's what you would, what you are going to assume. So are the people that are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement, are you gonna put in there that they will get 0 raises for the next 5 years, or maybe 0 for 2 years, and then maybe 1%? I mean, whatever whatever council, whatever the mayor is looking at and what he feels council will pass, quite frankly, because it does have to be passed by council. That stuff will be on the bottom. So it'll be all this, the revenues minus the expenditures, and then any recovery items will be after that. So you're likely going to see, because of the evergreen clause, we're going to now see a deficit in the general fund, because we're going to assume that whatever the current contract is still in play, as it should be, because it's a contract. And so that will likely, because it's not at that, so that will mean some raises in the expenditures that isn't in the current plan. But then if the plan is to negotiate, whatever negotiations that, through the negotiations that will change, they're going to assume that that will be on the bottom. So that way we'll be able to trace that. So if nothing happens, we'll get an 8-year, 5-year forecast that if nothing changes and they do what they are doing, they follow the contracts as it is, and just given like inflation for supplies, and also they have to include capital. So they have to have a capital plan in there. So they're going to have, bottom line, this is what the real world is going to look like. Then they go back and they say, well, how can we whittle away at that deficit? These are the things we're going to put in the plan, and that will be on the bottom. So that way, too, I think when we start looking at the plan and for consideration and approval, and we'll always go back to the plan and use that as a reference. Some of the items in the financial recovery plan may need to be passed by ordinance or resolution of the city. So we'll ask for it, well, is that happening? Is that happening? There have been, I've been in places where part of the recovery plan was, I'll give you an example. Go to the voters and ask for an increase in the property tax. So we put that in a plan, showed some improvement. So we just keep meeting and said, so have you put that on the ballot? Nope. Gets to a point, this you're not following the plan, so we need a new one. And following the plan that we have currently is very, very important, because I looked at, this actually came up, the revised code was changed since I last was at a commission. And so, as I see it, and if anybody is, you can Google the revised code if you have trouble sleeping at night. Section 118.06, Division F. If a municipal corporation, county, or township fails to submit a financial plan as required, or fails to substantially comply with an approved financial plan, upon certification of the commission shall notify the Office of Budget Management and all state funding for that municipal corporation, county, or township other than benefit assistance to individuals shall be withheld until subsequent notification from the Commission to the Office of Budget Management that a feasible plan has been submitted and approved or substantial compliance with the plan has been achieved, as the case may be. So adherence to the plan is extremely important. I don't want to be the person that has my signature on the certification that takes away all of Norwood's local government fund money or their gas tax money. So we do have to adhere to the plan. But as it stands now, understandably so, this condition will not be exercised because we know at this time, because we know that there were some issues with the plan and we needed a new plan. But as far as the spending is concerned currently that's in the plan, I would look to continue that with the exception of anything that needs to be modified for the contract provisions. So that really leaves you very tight, the city very tight, and so that again kind of prompts the need for a financial recovery plan pretty quick. He left, but what I will do is I'll get you folks a copy of 118.06 for the next meeting because I can't send it via email. And then so that you can see the criteria for what should be in a financial recovery plan. And certainly your law director can look at 118.06. You can always speak to the Auditor of State's office because that's their business, what they would be looking for in a financial recovery plan. And we'll go over that a little bit. And I guess we'll also want to see where we are with the report on accounting methods. Because certainly I have been in cities before where they're in much better, I wouldn't say good. It's a constant struggle on a daily basis, to be quite honest. Unless, I can't even name a city that's well off, but because there are issues that we don't see and they're able to handle that. But there's no such thing really as being safe. It's a constant struggle. There are just things that are not planned that you just have to muster up and deal with them. So it's difficult. Mr. Shepherd, what I was saying is that for the next meeting, I'll have copies of Section 118.06 available. And actually in the agenda, how am I going to do this? Let me think about this. I want to be very careful with public records. No, yes. Because I want to make sure that, 118.06, anybody could look. It's not a document that is hidden or just the purview of this particular commission. So I'll have to consult and see. But 118.06 does address what should be in the financial recovery plan. 118.27, I believe, is the section of revised code that has to do with what abolishment of the commission. So how we get out of fiscal emergency.
Thanks.
Okay. Is there any, I do have a question from old business, new business. And again, think about this, because if it is distributed, it is public record. Would it be of any use for anyone, for members of the commission, to to have available to them a commission roster. The roster would have contact information as far as address, phone number, and so forth, email.
I don't need one.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Okay. I've distributed my cards. I think, Mr. Schwartz, I have one more for you. I neglected to, could you pass that down? I neglected to check to see if I had any with me, quite frankly. For me, it doesn't matter because, I mean, my salary is public record. I'm an open book, so it doesn't, thank you. So I don't have any qualms over it. Any other old business, new business? Okay, if not, report of the mayor.
Thank you. So I did put together some notes here. And, part of it is to help the committee and the commission understand my history with the city of Norwood and how I ended up as being the mayor of the city of Norwood. I actually started with the city of Norwood as the director of service back in the early 2000s. I was actually sitting at City Hall when 9/11 occurred, watching it on one of the TVs there. So I've been around the city for quite a while. I'm raised in the city of Norwood, but I was the director of service. I was also the superintendent of public works. I was appointed mayor when a previous mayor became ill and held that position for 6 months. I ran for election and did not win. But my claim is that I was one of the last mayors to actually present a budget to the finance committee and to council all those years ago. There was a new mayor that was put in place, and he didn't feel like that was a necessity to come from the mayor's office. But I do feel like it's a necessity, and I think it's one of the mayor's responsibilities is to gather that information and put that starting information that goes, of course, to council and then goes to the finance committee and then once reviewed. I tried to put ordinances on years ago, setting the standards for what the officers of the city would do, when the treasurer's office would do things, when the auditor's office would do things. And clearly, with the mayor's office, I'm not the legislative authority, and they don't have the ability to pass things like that, but I brought that to light. This was back in early 2000, before the recession. So there was a lot of work that was done a long time ago to try to circumvent going into this situation we're in. Of course, the recession didn't help, and I don't really, you look at what the previous administration did, and they hunkered down, and they cut costs, and they tried to do what they could to survive, and we survived. But I am now up against a major amount of what I would consider to be deferred maintenance on all the buildings, on all the city properties, on deferred maintenance when it comes to maintaining the equipment that we have, the deferred purchases that need to be made. So there's a lot that needs to be done. January has been it's really been a fire hose worth of information sort of hitting you right in the face. Not that I came in naive. I knew there were a lot of challenges. When you talk about the financial recovery plan and the one that we have in place right now, and you say, oh, are you going to start over from scratch? Of course not. There's been too much good work done by these people, and I appreciate the volunteer efforts that the commission has put in place and the time that you guys have taken to get us where we are. And we are in a much better place today before this commission got involved. And I do think there are a lot of good things that have came from this commission working with the city. So I already have the financial recovery plan spreadsheet. I have all that information. I've sat down with the auditor, the city auditor. We are discussing it, going through it. I'll continue to work with council members, the legislative body, to make sure that they're up to speed on what I'm trying to accomplish. So that's an important part of it. Excuse me. There are the financial recovery plan that I was told it's got to be done by March, the end of March. Has to be done this year, drop dead date. The auditor made me aware of that as soon as, probably on election night when we were celebrating, holding a drink in our hand, he was saying, you got to start working on this right now. I understand that, and that's an important aspect of it. But there are a lot of other forks in the fire for the mayor's position right now. So negotiations, we briefly touched on those. Police and fire negotiations, I feel confident, I'm very confident in our in our fire department and police department, I feel cautiously optimistic that we are making headway. Just in January, there have been some good discussions. I do think there's some work to be done, but the goal here is really to try to get those two majors, those two, the two big elephants in the room, working in a direction. And I don't think these people are unfair. I think the employees recognize the position that the city's in, and I think they recognize we have to do capital improvements, and we need to purchase vehicles for them to do their job right, and we need to purchase fire trucks. So they recognize that. It's a matter of sitting down at the table and saying what's fair and reasonable for those organizations, and we'll continue to work on and through those. That's two. Public Works is the other union. They've got a contract that's open and needs to be, the clerks union, another one that has to be there. We've got both the fire chiefs do not have employment contracts, which they had in years past. And there's some challenges with some different things that the council, that city council, the legislative body did on what's going on with fire chiefs. So there are some challenges even getting the fire chief assigned, and then there's the trickle down of all the movement of people. So there are some real hurdles that have to be overcome. But I feel like, from what I have seen just in this month working with the city employees, they are ready to move forward. They're ready to get beyond all this. So, I think we'll move forward there. And I do, like I said, I'm optimistic. Brad, you talked a little bit about the healthcare stuff, and the percentage in the negotiations and in the agreements. There is some discussion there. I don't know how well we'll do in that, but it is being discussed. Health insurance has been and continues to be an important factor of those negotiations, and providing benefits to those people who have been here a long time and do a great job for the city is an important factor. There's the promoting a wellness program that was brought up. There's a wellness program that we should be taking advantage of. There's some benefits to that, but how do we make sure that our staff and the team members understand how that works and what that brings to the city, and how it's beneficial to them is an important part of it too. So we recognize that. The Bureau of Workman Comp refunds, that stuff was all started years ago. The city's safety committee was started years ago. It is something that we need to, and we will go back at and look at and make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure that our, the refunds that they're giving are really an incentive for us, for the administration, to make sure that the staff understand how to do the job safely and understand what equipment they need to do the job safely, and then also to refocus us on providing that stuff to them. Do the job right. Here's all the right safety equipment. Mm-hmm. So we need to continue to work on that, and we have done very well with the BWC refunds. So we're going to continue to work on that and try to keep that going in the right direction. So those are important parts of it. So then, we talked about City Hall staffing, and that was something and this is a question for you, is the staff at City Hall has been decimated through the years, through the recession. There were people that were removed, and then there were contract employees put in. There weren't good job descriptions for those contract employees. And what I'm trying to do is put in place, and actually the pay scale, to have qualified individuals working for the city. So a safety service director, the average pay for a safety service director in Hamilton County is $35,000 more than what our base rate is for hiring a safety service director for the city of Norwood. So I've went to council, I put together a staffing plan. I went to council, I said, this is what we need to do. This is the ordinance we need to put in place to try to increase the pay ranges in there. They, of course, are very nervous because the financial recovery plan doesn't put that in there. You had stated just a minute ago about finding staff and the labor force in Ohio. It's tough to find. It's going to be very tough to find a very good safety service director that has connections, that has that really is a career individual to provide the service levels and the service that we need at a competitive wage for the city of Norwood. I'm trying to put that in. I'm trying to put the foundation in place to hire individuals that we need. A building commissioner. You have to run a building department. You have to have a building commissioner, a certified building. So I'm trying to get a person put in place there. Community development director, an economic development director. We don't have that. A city the size of Norwood should have that. So these positions I'm trying to get in place. But I guess the question I would have to you on this is, as I ask city council to adjust these salary ranges, you know, these things will go into effect the same time I'm putting together the plan. Is council, by passing these and adjusting these pay ranges, is council putting us into a position where we are effectively going outside of the plan, and does that cause a problem for us?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've said before, I don't want to be the guy that tells the director of the Office of Budget Management to hold all of Norwood's local government funds.
So if
no,
we
I
pass something, on or I shouldn't say we, because it's council,
Yeah.
it's not me. If council passes something and they adjust the salary ranges for those employees, for the people that are not hired, that I'm going to hire, then you're saying that we are outside of the plan.
If you, let me retract that statement. Your expenditures currently cannot be substantially different than what is in the plan. If you wanted, to me though, what my dilemma is that if you pass the ordinances now, you've shown the intent not to stick with the plan, whether or not you have hired that person yet. I would heartily recommend that council wait to pass that. They can certainly have hearings on it. Was it usually 3 hearings and then the vote on the last one? They could certainly hold hearings on it, but I would ask that they not vote on it until you present a plan that has the costs in there.
Okay, all right, thank you. So then, the other question is, well, it's not a question. Talking about capital improvements and the plan that's put in place, there are a lot of items on the capital improvement plan that are going to stay on there. I don't see a reason to pull and reassign or do major changes to the capital improvements plans, but there are certain areas where I look at it and say, yeah, I'm going to make changes because it's important to have certain things that I see that need to be completed. So those are important parts of it. The first draft for review, I hope to have of the plan will be towards the end of, well, it'll be the end of February when I have it ready for review. And I know it has to be, is it approved by the commission? Or, well, it's approved by this commission, but approved by the state by when?
Well, we like to have the updates on a yearly basis, so we'd like to have it by the 27th of March. But I would say
It can be
to,
earlier.
yeah,
It can be earlier in March.
yeah, to grease the skid, so to speak, I would start involving them like right away.
Well, they're already involved.
Okay, all right, as long as they are.
They're already pulled in.
Because they have to, they're the ones that really help with the calculations and things like that, and the projections going out the 5 years.
All right, so the last part on my report would be that what my goal is for this commission, and I know it's important because it shouldn't be a lifetime commitment to your volunteer efforts. You know, earlier it was discussed April of 2021. I mean, that would be my target date goal for getting this stuff moved forward and being completed. So that's really all I had. I want this, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I do appreciate the volunteer efforts that you guys have made and the work that you've made and the progress so far. And you two clearly there's been a ton of effort and a lot of really good work. It's contentious at times, but that's the process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Miracle,
Good morning.
good morning.
Just a brief background.
Sure.
Grew up in Norwood and lifelong resident. I served 12 years on the school board, so I'm very familiar with the 5-year forecast. My background is accounting. I have a degree in accounting, so
Great.
accounting and finance. And my role as president of council is to conduct a business of council, and we have 4 new council members, and I'm new. So as Victor was alluding to before, it's kind of like drinking water out of a fire hose right now. So we're trying to review all the information, of course, all the financial information. I've been meeting with Jim Stith and trying to get up to speed as far as that goes. But basically, we're just going to try and work. I think we have a good group, and I'm looking forward to working with them in a collaborative effort. And I'm very pleased to be a part of this organization, part of this commission as well, because as Victor has alluded, our goal is to get out of this. Hopefully by next year that would be something that we could do. So we've had one meeting, organizational meeting, and we've only had one council meeting so far. So we're very, very new into this, and he's already talked about the ordinances that we were discussing in council. So. That's pretty much all I have for you this month.
Great. And how often do you meet? Is it twice a month?
Twice a month.
Okay. Any particular?
It's the second, fourth Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay. If you feel it would be of any benefit to you and council, I would be more than happy to speak to them if they have any questions about fiscal emergency and my role. So I'd leave that out. You've got my contact information, so. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. When shall we meet next, ladies and gentlemen? I heard probably March. Mid-March.
Do we want to meet before there's a new plan to address, or do we want to wait?
I'm kind of torn, simply because I want these folks to concentrate as much as possible on the plan. So I don't want to absorb too much of their time, because there is some time involved in putting these reports together and stuff. Any responses, ladies?
I would agree. I don't see
Okay.
any to meet in February.
Okay.
Is that what we did last year? I think, didn't we kind of maybe meet in January and
seems
then
like-
take off a month to give you guys time
It
to
seems like
develop
every
it?
other
Because
month seemed to be the pattern. I could be wrong, but,
It was more frequent in the beginning.
okay, okay.
It was more monthly to, every 2 out of 3 months kind of thing. But it
Okay.
seems like it's become more of a,
In the beginning, before they had a plan. yes,
Right,
it
yeah,
was
to get
more
ramped up
monthly,
and
but
kinda-
After we had a plan and we monitored.
right,
again.
right. It's
Plus, we've
fine
also
by me.
charged them with bringing a report on, the report on accounting methods, so kind of add a little bit more to their,
There's a lot to be done, that's
Yes.
for sure, so. I mean,
Yes,
especially if we're going to factor in contracts and increases and things like that, then there'll be some pulling and tweaking that's going to need to happen.
more like yanking, but yes,
Well.
I agree.
What's
Yes.
what is the process if the commission approves the plan, the commission approves it first, city council approves it second?
No, council approves it first.
Okay,
And we
Yes.
need at least 2 weeks' time to review it before we can bring it to the commission.
okay. So the
After-
plan,
After
has-
council approval.
We would like to review it before it goes to council.
the
So
plan has
it's-
to be completed by the 26th of March. That's the date that I was given.
Correct.
Correct.
Meaning it has to be approved. Not
Approved, so
completed.
By the
that's
commission.
approved by who?
The March,
Commission?
actually, the commission, I believe, approved it in April last year because we couldn't meet right when
Okay.
it was due.
Okay.
The council did approve it in March, but we would need to go back and look at that for sure, Sharon, but I think that occurred
Yeah, I
last
don't
year.
know, I mean,
The
I'm
years
not sure
before
what
it
the
didn't.
dates represent.
So I think it was in April, but it was approved by council in March.
Okay, city council has a meeting on March 10th and on March 24th.
Yeah.
To get it on city council, for council to even review it on the 10th, it would have to be to them by March 6th for it to be
Okay.
put on the agenda.
And we
But
would
that's
have-
for all 3 readings.
Well, but we would need it a week before.
Or two.
We want it 2 weeks,
We'll be working
I mean,
though.
if you
We
go
should be
back,
working,
go
yes.
backwards, I think the 24th might be,
but I'm just saying, if you just
More
send us a
prudent.
plan and we haven't been involved at all, we need 2 weeks to review. Now, if Anna Mary is working with you as you're putting it together, then I'll defer to you two to work that out, to make sure that we are completely reviewed and okay with it before you take it to council for approval.
Now, council, I will tell you, in the last couple of years, has not liked last minute things, and not only a couple of days, they've requested, I think you need to address that with your council, but, and, because one of the members is still a council member.
I was on council for 6 years. I didn't want last-minute
Yeah,
things. Of course
exactly.
not. So that's what
So
we
it
should be
has
looking
to
at our
be
dates.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, but I'm warning you, if you give it to them 6, I know that, that will not be looked upon very highly if you're wanting it passed on the 10th.
and I don't think this commission appreciates fast-tracking things either.
Well,
We want to make sure that the council vets it carefully and that,
Let me make sure we're on the same page here.
Yeah.
For something to be put on council's agenda, it has, for them to receive it in their packets, it has to be to them the Friday before the Tuesday council meeting. That's what the 6th date is.
Yeah.
Council members should be staying up to speed, and quite frankly, it's a problem of mine if I'm not helping them understand what progress we've made, and I'll tell you right now, all the council members are asking questions about what we're doing with this. So they're all fully engaged in it, I shouldn't say all, but there are many that are fully engaged in it right now. But the timeline that we're looking at, if they want to do 3 readings on this, then the final reading of this would be on the 24th. They would get it they would have it for the meeting on the 10th, right, of March. They would also have to have it for the meeting on the 18th. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you do the 3,
Is the 18th right at
Readings.
25th?
it's the second, I'm sorry, the 25th.
10th and 24th. So the 24th. So it's got to go
So
pretty
that-
early. So it
yeah,
has to be
it'd be like
completed
in a
and
month.
for them into the package on the 20th of March. No, is that correct? No, we're beyond that, yeah.
If they approve it on the 24th, let's say they approve the recovery plan on the 24th, even if this commission didn't meet until April, as long as the plan is emailed to the commission chair.
Yeah, we just have to receive it,
Okay.
Correct.
But we're going back to 3 readings.
right.
So the 24th is the final and 3rd reading of it. So you've got to work back
Right.
from there.
So you've got like you have to have it by the 21st, is that the Friday? Before the 24th, which is the 2nd, that's the 4th Tuesday.
Well, it's February.
25th of February.
25th of February. So for it to even go
Yes.
in their packet, so the 25th of February.
21st.
Be the
February
ninth.
So you have to have
21st.
it by the
Or
21st.
21st.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the question, Brandon, goes back to when does the commission want to meet again? Is that meeting after council has looked at it, so we can meet on the 26th
Of March.
of March?
Yes.
Correct. That
Is
would be the
there-
next.
Is there too great a downside to waiting until April?
Um, yeah, because we've got ordinances out there and we want to make sure that they don't pass them.
This is after it. I mean, April's, that's all done. Everything's been passed by council in April. The ordinances don't make a hill of beans of difference to you guys.
It has to be approved by the commission, though, to be, the financial recovery plan is not enforced until the commission approves, correct, Sharon?
Yes.
Appropriation.
And then the appropriations have to follow the FRP. That's the new one.
so I have very tentative travel plans.
Okay,
So, I mean, we can obviously operate without, every one of us here. So, 26 works for me, but
is that a Thursday?
that might change.
26th of March.
It's a Thursday. Can we get this room?
Yeah, there's court in the morning.
What about Wednesday?
The 25th?
Sorry?
25th is Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Is that when you have tentative travel plans? Or?
If I travel, I'll be out all week.
Okay.
Sharon, I have travel plans also that are in place for that whole week.
Okay.
But Wednesday, the 25th, works just fine, but for that.
April 1st.
What about the following Tuesday?
April 1st?
Is that April 1st?
Well, no, I think it's the 31st, March
31st.
31st.
There you go.
Well, it's Tuesday. Is court in this?
Monday, Thursday's court.
Oh, Monday, Thursday.
Today's Tuesday.
No, it's Wednesday.
Wednesday's short
Isn't
week.
Yeah, I know, it's,
The
yeah.
holidays, I know.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
That's better.
March 31st?
March 31st works, Mary? Yes.
I'm still
Works
going.
just fine for me.
Okay. Okay,
You're still going.
all right. Well, let's do March 31st then.
You stay with me.
Yes, 10 o'clock, still a good time.
That's the earliest we can do it, right? I know folks
Yeah,
are folks coming down
because you
from
don't want
Columbus.
to see me without coffee. It's a horrible thing.
Well,
It's a horrible, horrible
I'd say
thing.
the earlier the better. So,
Okay, 10.
but if, yeah, that's fine. It's just like, it's hard to, yeah, you know, it's
I
kind
know.
of.
It's in the middle of the morning, I get it.
Right.
Okay. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay, I'll call for, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Shepherd moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Schwartz, second. On a vote, Mayor Schneider.
Yes.
Council President Miracle.
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz.
Yes.
Mr. Shepherd.
Yes.
Mr. Vandahar is not here. Ms. Longnecker.
Yes.
And Ms. Hanrahan, yes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.